We always refrain to say we are an impact focused organization. However, I mean, it's really impossible to diversify impact and food as a separate topics, right? Because when we talk about like access to food, access to water, access to finance, access to being able to producing your own food, food sovereignty, all of these topics impacts our life really in a deeper manner.
By the way, we're probably rolling already, haven't we? Yeah, exactly. So, the reason I'm sitting here with Semi, he's going to be running our FoodTech Hub. So, Semi, welcome.
Great to be here. Great to be part of it.
I would like for you, if you don't mind, just briefly introduce yourself and give me a little bit of a background, and then we'll probably dig into your story.
So, as you know, I started my career as a chef. I always say it as in my previous life, I used to be a chef. So, but when I was in the kitchen, I felt like, other curiosity about food, about agriculture, and from
what was it? Yeah. What type of cuisine was it? We're talking like Michelin star
I did some
restaurant?
internships in Michelin star restaurants as well, but not in a massive manner. But I would say more on. I did a lot of events. I worked in kitchens here and there, but I did most of my time in like pop-ups. I did research projects on food. I worked with consulates on gastro diplomacy projects. So I kind of honed myself into more on the information side of food rather than being full-time in the kitchen, because I guess that's the good part. Like I had the opportunity to do more stuff, and that kind of brought me into the agriculture as well. So more I worked in food, I started to realize going into agriculture. So I did work in projects that are supported by EU in terms of small-scale food producers. I had experience, as I said, doing events, working with consulates. So all in all, kind of just like accumulated experience in terms of connecting, the culture, the information, the food and agriculture. Before I switched, what we do now is that we did a restaurant project, for example, in Berlin, connecting community and food through culture. So it was just a great experience to be able to see the backside of food. And that gave me a lot of opportunity to understand what actually, food, how does it come to our plate, how we cook it, and how we approach it. And then I met with my co-founder. Funny enough, she actually comes from a finance background, being a finance director of a really successful IT company.
Finance meets food.
Exactly.
Okay.
Because she decided to change careers at one point, decided to become a chef. That's actually how we met. And then I was like, why don't we do something more? We both love food. Why don't we just, go into more depth? Because she was bringing, expertise in technology and finance, and I was more into like agriculture, more and more about the soil itself. And we started the Cook Project, basically, our company. So that was basically how it happened, like out of our conversations and curiosity about food and agriculture. Fast forward 10 years, we started doing a lot of like working with like startups, supporting the climate transformation because we see a lot of urgency in there. And we've been working in emerging markets specifically because we see a lot of need and transformation and amazing, initiatives from the startups that are trying to change the sector into more sustainable ways. So that's what we do now. But it all started to just cutting some onions in the kitchen.
I'm a firm believer that everything happens with the right people get together, right? I mean, an entire concept of the pool parts from there.
True.
So you meeting your co-founder, tell me a little bit more about the first time you guys met, or tell me a little bit about that.
So this was like years ago. I think it was 2014 or beginning of the 15, around that area. We were doing this basically a research / community building project based in a contemporary art museum.
Wow.
So we had, I mean, it's a longer story, of course, but it's a story of for a couple of years. So basically, we were doing this activity where we were connecting people with mostly like young people. And again, this is like more than, almost more than 10 years ago. Actually, yeah, absolutely more than 10 years ago now, come to think of it. We started around like 2013. For a couple of years, we were based in the kitchen. We were doing some research. We were bringing people in, cooking with us, because they had basically a restaurant in the museum, but we kind of switch that into more like a community building space and a research center in a way. Not an official research, of course, but we were just like cooking. We just loved cooking. And a lot of chefs were...
community building.
Exactly. Build up a community.
Exactly, yeah.
So that community bring a lot of chefs, a lot of people in the food sector, and then it was sort of like a meeting ground in essentially a contemporary art space. And that's how I actually met one of those events with Shirley. Her name is Shirley. In an event, she approached me. We started talking, and I was like, "Why don't you just come here often more? We'll just cook and join the team and join what we do, etc." That conversation trickled into I was doing some more also other stuff in pop-ups, etc. in Turkey and outside of Turkey also. And then we just kept the conversation going. And then we both had a moment where we were looking into new opportunities, new activities, and we were both trying to figure out a way that we like food, we like technology, and the finance and investment part. That was her strong focus that was already bringing into table, but she loved food as well, as she became a chef because of that. So basically, the conversations that we were having that just became the company itself. Like the future of food, the future of agriculture, the technology, what is out there, how can we connect with it, etc.
You were united by the end game, basically.
Yeah.
So we're talking about you come from complete different backgrounds.
Exactly.
But you were united by the vision of this can be done, first of all, research and so forth, but it can be done in a better way, more sustainable way.
Exactly.
So you got the pure impact there as well.
Yeah, I mean, we always refrain to say we are an impact-focused organization. However, I mean, it's really impossible to diversify impact and food as a separate topics, right? Because when we talk about like access to food, access to water, access to finance, access to being able to producing your own food, food sovereignty, all of these topics impacts our life really in a deeper manner. So it's really hard to diversify impact and food as two different subjects. However, we always say, okay, no, we're agri first, we are food first, we are this first.
Why?
But yeah, I think it's a lot of the thing is, I think about this a lot as well, to be honest with you. But I think for the last decade, I've been trying to say that food and agriculture has to be approached as a separate topics. Food and agriculture together, but along with the climate and on this and that, it's really hard to put everything in one place. Because the interesting thing about food and agriculture is that the climate and the impact of it, etc., food gets impacted directly, but it's also the reason that creating that impact at the same time. I personally don't know any other industry in the world that is the reason and experiencing the suffering of the impact, the climate with this manner. Yeah. So I always say that's why we have to separate that by its own. Food and agriculture is a standalone, massive subject, and I think the world is slowly shifting that position as well. That's why we always try to keep it separate, but of course there's an impact to it.
Geographically, your operation currently, I mean, maybe let's dig deeper into your day-to-day. What are you involved with right now?
Absolutely.
Well, first of all, your recent move, right?
That's true.
Exactly, yeah. Well, we'll get into that separately. We'll go into your personal trajectory afterwards, but tell me a little bit about your day-to-day currently.
I'll do that. So basically, again, we started in Istanbul. But more and more we spend time in our sector, we realize there's a lot of organizations across the globe doing similar activities. So we started building a lot of relationships and cultivating them, and then building basically activities with them. And that one of the reason why we're doing this is that because we see a lot of need in emerging markets. Mm-hmm. So for the last couple of years, we started expanding our reach. So we have activities in Turkey. Mm-hmm. We have activities in Eastern Europe. We have an office in Budapest. We have an office in Hague, where we are doing currently building some operations in there from the Netherlands to connecting other markets globally. And with my move to Madrid, we're also exploring now. We'll get into it later. You're looking at me like, okay, cool. And then also we do some activities in Southeast Asia as well with our local partners in the region, mostly looking into ASEAN transformation in terms of the climate and agri-food. But as a company, we have partners, as I can say, the partners, because we've been cultivating these relationships for 10 years, from Japan to through Canada even. So basically, we cover a lot of emerging markets, and we build on basically through the activities of accelerators, corporate innovation, or basically providing strategic consulting services to governmental institutions or development finance institutions. We're also building some venture capital funds, and that's also in play.
Which you're going to be raising for quite soon, right?
Yes. Yes. So we're currently working on to build our Emerging Europe Fund to invest in countries that we see a lot of potential in terms of the emerging Europe.
Okay.
So we're looking in Poland, Romania, Hungary, but also the Baltics and the Balkans. So EU member states within the region. We've been also working a lot in Turkey because of where we started, and we see a lot of potential, and we see a lot of great startups and great initiatives in the country, and also expanding that to the Turkic region through the east as well. So we're looking into developing similar frameworks into that level. But with the fund, we're currently looking into emerging Europe side. Okay. So there's a lot on my plate, but I enjoy it a lot.
I was about to say, because I think that the question was, what's your day-to-day look like? But you're basically explaining that it's
starts around like 8 a.m. with calls from Asia, and then finishes around like if there's one in Canada. So basically, it's a longer. I would say it's a quite a long day, but I'm happy with it. So I'm knocking the wood on that. Basically, my day-to-day involves on meeting with startups, meeting with corporates, meeting with governmental institutions across the globe, understanding the dynamics in terms of climate adaptation, climate transformation, how we can create value through our partners, how we can develop further support mechanisms for startups to integrate their solutions into more markets that there is actually a lot of need. That's my day-to-day look like.
One thing I am really curious about, because obviously you are, it's two-sided really, right? I mean, one of them would be the first aspect of it is integrating these new technologies that you see in the startups to get them to be like used all over.
Yeah.
So then obviously I think that's where the bureaucracy and comes into place.
Sure.
But then at the same time to see how, raising these funds actually to make sure we can accelerate these projects.
Yeah.
And you're doing that in different geographical areas.
Sure.
What is the difference of doing that in Europe, where you're doing that, you mentioned Canada, or doing it in Singapore, for instance?
Honestly, it's been, I love that question that you asked, because that was like the big chunk of learning, I would say, for the last couple of years. So I've been, for example, going to Asia since 2019 and building and cultivating these relationships. I think it's the most important word is that. And after 6 years spending this much time, also in Middle East and GCC, we have here and there activities. We did develop some programs, for example, in GCC region as well. I think at the end of the day, it's really coming down to the relationships. And I think I find that really fascinating as well, because along the way, we've been coming across with a lot of organizations similar to us, not necessarily in food, but similar to expanding their reach, doing accelerators, doing funds, etc. But they always get the wrong message, I think, which is that these things take time, but not to your pace. It's basically the pace of the market, the sector, the people, and basically the relationships itself. So that was a great learning, I would say, for the last 6 years. And I love spending time in Asia Pacific for that reason, because I think it's really coming down to the fact about how to build trust, how to build these relationships, and how you can prize and thrive with these, prize these relationships and then a thriving ecosystem to everyone. I think that's one of the key differences that I see. In Europe, I think that same thing applies. I think it's really relationship driven as well, which is a good thing, because at the end of the day,
I was going to ask you, do you think it's a good thing or you think it's a bad thing?
I think I'm a genuinely optimistic person overall.
Mm-hmm.
And I see challenges sometimes. I approach it in a really optimistic manner as well. But I see it as a good thing, because at the end of the day, I think everyone would experience is that even if the project or the activity is really rewarding, really great, etc., you can always fail due to the wrong positioning of these relationships, not in first year, but in a couple of years down the line. And we're talking about, for example, LP conversations. These are for a good long time, and then a lot of expectations coming in. So I think it's really important to cultivate these relationships. Same case with the corporates, same case with the governmental institutions. I think it's quite rewarding to focus on that rather than the quick results. We see that a lot of time, for example, in GCC, because of the approach is that, you should definitely raise in GCC. But it's not like you just go there and they write you a check and then you just leave. It doesn't
Which many people think it is.
Which many people, but that is surprising, by the way. A lot of people think that it's that easy. It's not. It's definitely not. So I think that's one of the key differences that I see.
And then we've got Canada, which is or let's call America
Canada
in
is
general.
just starting now. I have less experience in that region, but we're looking into LATAM as well. We want to build up more exposure. So overall, I think the North and South America is the next steps for us. This is the region that we have not much exposure, but we're building now, and we're
big potential.
100%. Oof, 100%. I'm absolutely like mesmerized with it. Canada part specifically in terms of, because of, I know it's going to be boring stuff, but grains and biotech, and these are like massive sectors. It's needed. And you see a lot of potential for field integration because of the scale of the production capacity and simply put, hectares, basically. Same thing in South America. The bigger hectares, a lot of production and a lot of potential to be tapped in, to be worked within, and focusing on the technologies, and which will create a lot of impact, because we're talking about global South that needs, of course, separating Canada from this conversation, but a lot of need is out there for the transformation of it, for the food security on a global level. So that is a really exciting market for me to be more focused. And I think this is, as we're just, talking about the Marbella 2.0 and the FoodTech Hub, I think that's one of the cases that I think positioning Spain as a launch pad to LATAM markets, because I think there's a lot of opportunities to integrate great technologies within Spain, especially in the southern side, and expanding that in the natural markets like Latin America. I think it's just, every time I think about it, I'm like, this is fantastic. Like,
I mean, Madrid is that, basically, at the end of the day. I mean, I would say Madrid is the landing place if, it's both ways. It's a landing place, and is also the part that you would go from in order to get into LATAM, and from LATAM to get into Europe as well.
Right.
Like, for instance, like all the real estate operations nowadays, especially the big buildings, there's normally capital coming from Latin America, in Madrid, I mean. But then there is a natural movement, which is kind of interesting as well.
Yep.
Like, you get all these people who come from Latin America, normally like these... from the venture funds, investors, and so forth. And the landing place is obviously Madrid.
Right.
After a couple of years, where do you find them? Further south.
Yeah,
find them
exactly.
in Marbella and so forth. It makes a difference. It really, really does. But also, one thing that I love about what you said and about the human aspect of everything.
Yeah.
In a moment where everything is focused on tech,
Right.
and even just take out AI, but you still got blockchain, you've got quantum, you've got everything. And when you've got all these ingredients, and I think having this as a base, I think it just elevates the human aspect of everything that we do. I think at the end of the day, it's all about, for instance, your project would not have happened if you wouldn't have this personal connection with Shirley, who you met at this moment, 100%. And you had this shared objectives and goals. That's what I'm seeing lately. I think the human element is just elevated a lot, and I think that is really, really interesting. You mentioned Marbella 2.0.
Yeah.
You mentioned the FoodTech vertical, which we're launching as an... Yeah, exactly. Obviously, you're going to be running our FoodTech. That's going to be fun. And I'm really excited to see what we can bring to the table. But as a general overview, and don't worry, I'm not expecting a full pitch of this or anything like that. But tell me a little bit what your objective is with this FoodTech vertical hub. What would be your objective for it?
Absolutely. So I think, as you mentioned, a lot of landing happens within Madrid, and then along the way, people tend to move to the south. We did the opposite. So we came in first to Malaga.
You're always being special, exactly.
I appreciate that. That's a big compliment. Thank you. So we basically spent the time 3 months in Malaga, and then I was basically really intrigued about the agriculture sector in the south, and looking into some of the challenges that, as I heard, like the water is becoming more and more a massive topic in this region. Plus the transformation, plus the momentum we see a lot in the European Union in terms of changing regulations for like bio-based solutions, etc. But plus also the economics in Spain is also quite growing. So there's a lot of correlating position that we see in terms of the agriculture sector. Then we moved to Madrid, as you said. So we recently moved there. It's been, I think, our second month is finished now, or the third. So basically now I had the opportunity to connect with a lot of ecosystem players within Madrid, and also in the north, also in the southeast as well. So give or take more understanding the need and interest, and also the understanding, and most importantly, Spain is an amazing food hub, like, period.
Yeah, exactly.
Fantastic. But there's also a lot of
That's a slogan for the FoodTech Hub.
Yeah.
Spain is amazing for food.
Yeah.
Period.
Exactly. Yeah. So basically, seeing this potential and then thinking also about the challenges that, as I mentioned, in terms of water, in terms of production, in terms of changing transformation and the climate impacts, there's actually a lot of gap that can technology play a great role, where the technology either produced, developed within Spain or coming to do basically integration within Spain. I think it's really crucial to build up pathways to be able to create that transformation. Not necessarily just to focusing on bringing companies abroad, but rather developing partnership opportunities for the local companies, local corporations, and basically building more access to technology to the agri-food producers across the country. I think that's one of the pitching points that I can share for the FoodTech Hub.
And I love it because it's really needed.
It is.
I've got to say. I mean, obviously, I've been living here for 40 years.
That's true. Yeah.
And as soon as you move into ag-tech, well, agriculture in general, you basically see that you've got the ag part, but you don't have the tech part.
Right.
It's very traditional.
Yeah.
But once again, now we're moving into an era where we really do need to make the most out of the resources we have. Sure. So I think tech, as I agree with you, it does have a substantial impact on that area. So I think it's really needed.
Exactly, and that's how I see the role of FoodTech Hub within the core focus of Marbella 2.0 and the pool's role in this, because I think it's really important to showcase that there's a hub where the startups can come in, can join in and connect with the ecosystem, where they can facilitate their technologies within the region, and then they can be based in here and look into opportunities within the adjacent region and look into basically developing pilot first approach where they can showcase and then expanding into potentially to the Latin American markets from here. I think that's also one of the core target points that we can look into, because as you said, there's a clear need, but there's also a clear potential. So in considering the fact that it's really close markets, I'm not talking about the distance, as you know already. I'm talking about culturally, I'm talking about the language, I'm talking about the approach. Of course, they're not the same, and that's definitely, I think, the first thing when people look into these markets understand, there's a lot of similarities, but not the same exactly. But there's also the fact that to integrate these solutions, that to say, we did it in Spain, now we're looking in Argentina, now we're looking in Colombia, now we're looking in Mexico. I think that creates a lot of movement and opportunity. And I think that plays an important role to say there's a gateway to do so.
Love the vision.
I appreciate it.
Exactly. So okay, well done. I'm going to enjoy that one. We're going to follow it quite often. That's and let's be honest. I mean, food tech, the way it's related to ag tech, we had the ag tech vertical before, just makes complete sense. And I don't really see many other industries that have such a direct impact as that one could have, and especially here locally.
Right.
Considering that the big part that agricultural plays here in the area.
Sure.
You personally, tell us a little bit about, because obviously started in Turkey, moved around. Tell me a little bit of the journey.
How I came in Spain, that's the journey.
Yeah, exactly.
So basically, I'm born and raised in Turkey, but I'm also Sephardi, which is basically the Sephardic Jewish people migrated to the Ottoman Empire. So that created I would say, already a connection when I, born and raising, and in terms of cultural, in terms of basically all the other aspects to it. So Spain was always really intriguing for me, and I was always wanted to spend more time. When we started to, expanding our activities, we're now in the process of basically transforming our headquarter into more, the Netherlands side, and then we have offices, as I mentioned, in Budapest and Turkey and the other places that we're currently building. But in the first part, we moved to the Netherlands with my wife. And Netherlands is an amazing place. The ecosystem-wise, agri-food is just phenomenal. Like we can talk about it hours and hours and then. But the weather is horrible.
That little note at the end.
But everybody knows that. But the beauty of it is that everybody says that as well. And people are fantastic. I really liked it. But for us, we felt like, I think it's really a better move for us to consider a move to Spain. and then being able to, because as I said, I'm on the move quite a bit and moving around and then going into the offices, etc. So we decided, I think the best move for us, and again, it's a common decision with me and with my wife, is that we wanted to move to Spain, and we really like to test it out. So we started in Malaga. We really loved Malaga as well. Fantastic city, fantastic. You're close to the beach. Weather is amazing. Food is amazing. But out of that, we also had the understanding that why don't we move into Madrid, so that ease of moving other parts is that. So that come in play with us moving to Madrid. But this has been a journey, I would say, for the last good 2 years or so, because we wanted to do the right move, and we wanted to do the move that would make us happy and enjoy our time, but at the same time in a place that we would thrive. Essentially, we really enjoy it here. It's a great country, and people are absolutely welcoming, and this was actually absolutely pleasantly surprising from my end. The ecosystem in Spain is absolutely really welcoming, really open for collaborations, and this has been a really exciting journey so far. And when my road took me from a great introduction from a great person with you, and then connecting with Pool, that created more excitement on my end as well. And this is, we're only talking about within the last 6 months. So this is really exciting journey. And I'm really looking forward to it. That's how my road came into Spain.
And I love, because as I said, back again, I mean, I've been here for 40 years, and I love how people can come, for instance, from places like the Netherlands, for instance, and say that they're moving to Spain, Madrid or Malaga, it doesn't really matter, but feeling that they're not compromising, that, okay, we're getting the quality of life, we're getting the things that you love, food, ecosystem, welcomeness, etc. But I'm not sacrificing the dynamic ecosystem. Right. I'm not sacrificing the potential of meeting interesting entrepreneurs, people who inspire me, or at least my job possibilities are not limited. So that's one thing that I'm really proud of nowadays, and the people like you fit into the mold and enjoy it. So that's really, really fun. If you were to guess what the next 5 years would look like, what do you obviously, I take it that 5 years you will probably still be here in Madrid, if I'm not wrong. Professionally, what do you think? You launched maybe a couple of other funds, or
So basically, I mean, way I see it is that I see it as like an architecture, right? There's a great painting by the name is lost on me, but it's called The Architect. It's an American painter that has like a different cultures of buildings in the same painting, and the architect sits down and watches the buildings. I'm always really inspired by that painting, and then that is kind of like the inspiration from my end. So we are in between a lot of cultures, a lot of regions, and building a lot of essentially frameworks. So what we're trying to achieve, and I think that's the main goal of the next 5 years, is to establish our regional frameworks, which are the regional focused and accelerators pairing up with the funds. So the essential point is that building a mechanism where the startups can have the opportunity to integrate these technologies, receiving funding, and then scaling across the regions and potentially globally. We want to build up these entry points for the great startups have the great potential to expand and implement their solutions into the field directly. So
and through you, obviously, reach all these areas that you're already implemented in.
Exactly. Okay. This is what we're looking into, because we are, at the end of the day, we saw a lot of potential and the need at the same time, as I mentioned, and specifically in the emerging markets, you can see that quite vividly. So that comes in play with the already existing relationships and activities that we're doing. What we've been trying to now convert into is to build up the framework where we can support the startups in a regional manner, and then connect them with the regional corporates, and then connect them with an investment track where they can receive these capital support to expand across the regions. And if there's an opportunity for them to expand to the other regions, instead of spending, let's say, 6, 12, or 18 months trying to figure out which country is the best, which has the more incentives, this and that, etc., if they are part of our ecosystem, either through an accelerator or the funds that we're currently building, they can understand which markets has the potential, because we are already in their cap table, essentially. So,
okay, of course.
Of course, there's a biased approach that I have, because, I mean, essentially, that's how we are doing. But nevertheless, the way we see it in the next 5 years is that we'll be establishing these frameworks within the certain regions, as I mentioned, mentioned. So Southeast Asia, Eastern Europe, Turkic region, and we're looking into Spain, LATAM perspective as well. So we're seeing these basically transformative markets as emerging innovation corridors, basically.
Okay.
So and that comes in play with more also exploring activities in GCC as well. So we're building this block by block. And I'm happy to say we're taking our time. We have no rush.
If somebody were to be listening right now,
Yeah.
what would be your asks? So, for instance, obviously, I take one of them if there's any investor who's interested in investing in,
Yeah.
okay, I'm not going to say impact fund, but still
Sure,
ag tech
sure.
and food tech and so forth. And what would be the rest? If somebody were to listen, what would be okay, so I'm looking for this, I
Yeah.
need this. So if anybody's listening, please reach out.
Yeah. Agri-food, B2B, upstream. If these words make any excitement or interest, definitely we are the organization and I'm the person that I would love to meet with them as well. So we focus on the climate focused transformation and climate resilience. So with the fund side is the same approach. We want to change basically the climate transformation and accelerate the momentum within the emerging markets. And we are coming across with a lot of organizations who are also excited to do so, taking part in that change. So they can definitely reach out. I'm more than happy to connect if it's a corporate, if it's, again, interested to what we do in terms of the VC side, or essentially if it's a really interesting startup and looking into the regions that we're working in, I'm happy to connect with them as well. So I'm more than happy to have these conversations further on.
Perfect. What does Semi do when he's not working?
Oh, cooking. Seriously, I love cooking. This is the thing that just created all.
Who cooks at home?
That's
exactly it.
That's okay, so
yeah, your wife is going to enjoy this question.
yeah,
exactly.
she cooks a lot. She cooks a lot, of course, but she cooks amazing food as well. So way we did structure this is that we put in basically topics in each day what we're going to eat if we're eating at home. So we put basically a theme in each meal. So if it's today, let's see, we eat stew. Next day we eat fish, etc. And based on that, we generally decide on who's going to cook on what. I love to cook and she knows that because it's sort of like a meditation for me. If I'm not working, I just love to spend time in the kitchen, just play with the ingredients, understand what can I do, watch some recipes, watch some TV shows in terms of food, again, some chefs, etc. And then I try to check out restaurants as much as I can, but I try to go with essentially just really small neighborhood ones or community restaurants. I love those. For me, maybe it's just the PTSD thing because I had an experience to working in these sort of like kitchens and Michelin star, etc. Not massively, but at least I had the experience to do so. I just don't enjoy as much. I enjoy really straightforward, honest, simple plates that tells a story, that tells about the culture, the ingredients. And for me, that's my downtime. Like I love that to understand, what is the behind of that ingredient, the recipe, the food itself. So I genuinely just spend most of my time when I'm not working in food, somehow.
I love it because I have the beauty of my job is I get to speak with really interesting people.
Right.
And everybody's got their own meditation aspect to it. In your case, it's cooking. Mine is roasting coffee. That's what I do. Yeah, exactly.
Nice.
I roast coffee. And some people, we spoke to a gentleman earlier today. He loves glass blowing. So everybody's got their own. Yeah, exactly. But everybody's got their own kind of meditation thing. And I think it's really important to have those.
100%.
Because otherwise you can just keep on. And it needs to be something that has the potential of taking your mind off things for 1 hour, 2 hours, or something like that. And I think everybody's got their own.
100%.
Semi,
Sure.
I think we've covered a lot of things. Looking forward with excitement what the destiny of the food tech vertical hub is going to look like.
Yeah.
So thank you for coming, and we will be having more of these in the future.
Thanks for having me.
Thanks.
Nice.